I read 14 dark and paranormal romance books in 14 days, and today I want to talk to you about Worship by Ellis James. This is a male-male romance, and I'm not really sure why it was recommended on so many dark romance lists. There are some BDSM elements or some DS or top-bottom sorts of elements, but it's not prevalent. I'll make sure that I put any of the content warnings on the screen, so if any of this stuff in a book is going to bother you, go ahead and skip this review. This is going to be a spoiler-free review. The basics of the book, the plot of the book, is basically that there's this guy named Vance. He's kind of a party animal. He's an artist. He's a little free-spirited, and he is on a cruise. The cruise has docked on a little island, you know, doing snorkeling for the day or whatever, and he sort of falls into, I say bed, they're on a beach, there's sand everywhere, with this chick from the cruise. And she's like, oh, haha, can I get your number? And he's like, why? So that tells you who Vance is. Anyway, so they're drinking tequila and he passes out. And I guess she just like leaves him there and decides not to let them know that he's just unconscious there in the hammock. So the cruise ship leaves. If anybody's been on a cruise, they do that, by the way. If you're not on the ship, they just leave without you. They tell you when to be back. If you're not there, that's it. So they leave him there and he's like stranded literally on this desert island by himself. And eventually, after spending a full day there with no water, he sees a yacht in the distance, sort of 60 yards off the coast of this little island, and he decides to swim out to it. Climbs up onto the deck of the yacht to get some help, and is promptly beamed in the head with a bottle of whiskey. This is our introduction to Luke, the second main character. Luke is famous and very straight-laced and has a reputation to uphold. But once he figures out Vance has no idea who he is, the sort of sparks that are kindling between them just ignite fully. And these two men fall into a passionate love affair. And then just as abruptly, Luke ends things. He takes Vance to a port where he can meet up with his cruise ship, drops him off, shakes his hand, and that's it. The two go their separate ways. Only he can't. Neither of them can. Despite the fact that Luke is still completely in the closet and his life is in no way compatible with the relationship with Vance, these two men cannot get each other out of their heads. This is the first book in a series, and this one covers several years, the first several years after they first met each other, where they sort of try to stay away from each other, and then they can't, and they just sort of like crash into each other in these desperate meetings, only to push apart again and try to go their separate ways, and they just can't stay away from each other. Truth be told, I'm not really sure why it was recommended on so many dark romance lists. There are some BDSM or DS aspects to the story. I have a feeling that's going to get a little more prevalent as the series progresses. It was leaning that way a little more heavily towards the end of the book. But in general, this is more a love story about one character being in the closet and the other character trying to be patient and trying to be understanding and trying to be supportive and really struggling through that. Like I said, it's entirely possible that the series gets darker as it goes along, but the first book is pretty mild aside from some light DS aspects or light BDSM aspects. There is a lot of on-page sex, a lot of on-page very explicit sex. If you've been around the channel a long time, you know I'm not really a fan of erotica. It has its time and place, it certainly has its purpose, but it's not really my thing. I tend to prefer my sex scenes to be a little more subtle, a little more subdued, a little more like leaving things to the imagination. This is not that. Very, very explicit. Basically, the first half of the book is just porn. And then the second half of the book is where you really start to get to know the characters and really get into the story. And that's when it really starts to shine. By the end of the first maybe 30%, I thought, oh, this is just going to be like a whole bunch of sex. They have a tumultuous affair, whatever. And then the author started dropping these little like personality hints and little allusions to backstory or allusions to emotion, allusions to feeling, things that are beyond just the surface and beyond just the sex. And it really started sort of hooking you in. Like I said, I'm not a fan of really explicit sex. I read romance for the romance, not for the spice. So despite the first several chapters being basically nothing but sex, once it starts getting into the story and getting into the characters, it's really good. you can actually feel the sort of emotional tether between these two men. You can feel the way that they're sort of bound to one another and that the absence of the other person physically hurts. And I've felt that before. It's intense. I loved the way that the author portrayed the wicked temptation of doing something illicit. The thrill that you get from participating in something that's a secret, and then the inevitable heartbreak once you start realizing that that's all it's ever going to be. That you will always only ever be a dirty little secret, and the shame that accompanies knowing that they are embarrassed for anyone to find out that they're with you. I know what that feels like. The heartbreak and the world-shattering, perspective-shattering emotions that fill you and wreck you. And the author did an amazing job at portraying those emotions. I found that by the end of the book, I was so invested in the characters and wanted them to be together so badly that I was shaking the book and shouting at Luke to just get it together and realize that love is love and you love who you want and consequences be damned, go be with him. So I guess that's a testament to how well the story was written. Overall, there was too much explicit sex in this book for my taste, especially up front. But I'm not really a good measure of that. I never like overt on-page sex, regardless of gender. So if that's something you really like, don't let that put you off. If you're like me and you tend to prefer more fade to black, just be aware that it's there and that it is worth going through the first half of the book to get those little glimpses into the characters. The rest of it, though, the characters and the story and the emotional portrayal of the experience of being with somebody or wanting to be with somebody who doesn't want to be with you because they are ashamed. That emotional roller coaster of giving love only to have the reciprocation ripped away because the other person is ashamed. And that the way that it makes you feel dirty and unwanted. That roller coaster of emotion is beautifully portrayed in this book. It's really well done. And sort of the obsession of waiting and wanting and hoping that the other person realizes that it's worth it and then they just never do, or maybe they do and you just keep waiting. So yeah, if you're into that sort of emotional portrayal, this book actually does a really good job of it, interspersed with all the sex. So if you're looking for a lot of really explicit male on-page sex, this might be your thing. If you're looking for excellent character portrayals of love over distance and sort of characters that you can really root for and really want to be together and want them to sort of get over their personal hang-ups so that they can be together, you might like this book. I know that I really enjoyed it a lot more than I thought I would based on the first 20 or 30%, but once I got past that initial like, oh, it's just constant sex, and it actually started getting into the story, I really enjoyed myself. That's all I've got for this one. Like and subscribe if you haven't. Support me on Patreon if you wanna, and join the Discord if you want to talk to me about books or writing or anything else. Thank you so much for watching. Have an excellent day, and I'll see you next time.